As you know, from April 14th to 18th this year, Chinese President Xi Jinping paid important state visits to 3 ASEAN countries: Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia. This visit had 2 particularly remarkable backdrops. First, the United States brazenly launched a global tariff war, with Southeast Asian nations bearing the brunt. These countries, and indeed the entire world, expected China to demonstrate leadership, and China did not back down, becoming the cornerstone in resisting the U.S.'s perverse actions. Second, 5 days before the visit, the Central Conference on Work related to neighboring countries was held in Beijing. The conference proposed that China would build a community with a shared future with its neighbors, with the common vision of creating a peaceful, tranquil, prosper, beautiful, and friendly home for all. During this visit, President Xi pointed out that the vast ocean of economic globalization has benefited all countries, and no country can retreat to a closed island. As important forces of the global South, China and its neighbors must strengthen coordination and cooperation, jointly oppose unilateralism, and respond to the law of the jungle with Asian values of peace, cooperation, openness, and inclusiveness, safeguarding the bright development prospects of the Asian homeland. President Xi also emphasized that China's super-large market is always open to neighboring countries, welcoming more high-quality products from ASEAN countries to be exported to China, and China's door to opening up will only open wider. During the intensive 5-day visit, all 3 countries received President Xi with the highest courtesies, signaling Southeast Asian nations' strategic priority for relations with China. General Secretary Xi Jinping chose Vietnam as the first stop of his overseas visits this year, just as General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong chose China for his first overseas visit after assuming office last year. The 2 sides issued a joint statement and signed 45 cooperation documents, greatly promoting the upgrading of practical cooperation between the 2 countries. In particular, China-Vietnam railway cooperation achieved expansion and upgrading, with both sides set to achieve full connectivity of standard-gauge railways. This will greatly enhance cross-border transportation capacity and further unlock the development potential of the economic corridor between China and the Indo-Chinese Peninsula. General Secretary Nguyen Phu Trong stated that this visit strengthened Vietnam's confidence in overcoming risks and challenges and advancing the cause of socialism, and that Vietnam is willing to strengthen coordination with China, uphold international trade rules, and abide by the agreements signed by both sides. The second stop of this visit was Malaysia. The traditional friendship between China and Malaysia spans a millennium, and practical cooperation between the 2 countries has always been at the forefront of the region. The most important outcome of this visit was the announcement by the leaders of both countries to build a high-level strategic China-Malaysia community with a shared future. This marks another leap in the positioning of bilateral relations, following the announcement in 2023 that China and Malaysia would jointly build a community with a shared future. The 2 sides agreed to jointly create a highland for new quality productive forces cooperation in the region, focusing on cutting-edge fields such as the digital economy, green economy, and artificial intelligence, and strengthening the integrated development of industrial chains, supply chains, value chains, data chains, and talent chains. The leaders of both countries agreed to advance flagship belt and road projects such as the East Coast Rail Link in Malaysia and the Two Countries, Two Parks initiative, transforming Malaysia's important ports into key hubs for the new international land-sea trade corridor. the two sides signed 26 cooperation documents. China and Malaysia also decided to launch a Confucian-Islamic civilization dialogue to promote mutual learning and exchange between Confucian and Islamic civilizations. I recently participated in the China-Arab Reform and Development Forum, where I also introduced the decision by China and Malaysia regarding the Confucian-Islamic civilization dialogue. Representatives from Arab countries attending the forum believed that this would have profound significance for cooperation between China and the Arab world. Malaysia is also the rotating chair of ASEAN this year. President Xi emphasized that China firmly supports ASEAN unity and community building, supports ASEAN centrality, and is willing to work with regional countries to sign the upgraded protocol of the China-ASEAN Free Trade Area as early as possible. Malaysian Prime Minister Anwar Ibrahim stated that what truly embodies China's strength is its resilience in calmly responding to various disturbances, and that China is a rational, strong, and reliable partner. China brings not only stability, but also hope for a lasting future. ASEAN does not approve of any unilateral imposition of tariffs and will unite to strengthen itself and maintain economic growth. The third stop of this visit was Cambodia. The friendship between China and Cambodia is a millennium-spanning two-way journey, where historically Chinese and Khmer civilizations have embraced and learned from each other, shining brightly together. Chairman Hun Sen held a long and in-depth meeting with President Xi Jinping. The highlight of this visit was the joint announcement by President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Hun Manet to elevate the China-Cambodia relationship to a new era all-weather China-Cambodia community with a shared future. This is the first time China has elevated bilateral relations with a Southeast Asian country to an all-weather level. And it is also the first new era all-weather community with a shared future built at the bilateral level, continuously enriching cooperation in 6 major areas: politics, production capacity, agriculture, energy, security, and humanities, also known as the Diamond Hexagon Cooperation Framework, setting a model for building a community with a shared future for mankind. In conclusion, this important state visit further strengthens strategic mutual trust between China and these 3 countries, as well as with ASEAN as a whole, expanded greater space for the convergence of interests, and deepened pathways for civilizational dialogue. All of this has transformed China's concept of a community with a shared future for its neighbors into actionable country-specific cooperation plans and regional governance solutions, thereby bringing more certainty to this uncertain world and making comprehensive China-ASEAN cooperation a great practice in implementing a new order for a multipolar world and a community with a shared future for mankind.
Delighted to be back here in Shanghai to see the wonderful progress the city and the people are making. It's always a pleasure to come back and to meet people and to have interesting conversations with them. I'm optimistic for the relationship between China and ASEAN for the long term, beyond US-China relations. And the reason is because there's a long history of contact between China and Southeast Asia, going back a very long time. During the Han Dynasty, China had already mapped the meridian in the Java Sea. On what ship, we don't know. But every time China was united, was strong, and had a big market, the China trade brought prosperity to the kingdoms and principalities of Southeast Asia. And sometimes these kingdoms fought each other to get a bigger share of the China trade. During the Tang Dynasty, we had Sriwijaya, The Ming Dynasty, we are all familiar with the voyages of Zhang, which, despite many centuries, have left an indelible imprint on the minds of the people. So all over Southeast Asia, today, there are Buddhist temples honoring Sanbao Taijian, the Admiral Zhang. So when Southeast Asian countries see a re-emerging China, they have a sense of what it will be like, because they have a historical memory of what China was like in previous periods. No one wants China as an enemy, because that's too troublesome. And it's not necessary. China wants a certain orderliness and mutual consideration in the way the countries of Southeast Asia and China interact. And that is not difficult. So when, as Professor Zhang just said, when C2C visited Vietnam, Malaysia, and Cambodia recently, the optics were full of ceremony and warmth. In Hanoi, the president received President Xi at the airport. In Malaysia, the prime minister went to the airport himself. In Phnom Penh, the king went to the airport. But this is not to say that Southeast Asian countries do not have their own fears and concerns. The reason is this. Trade between China and ASEAN reached $1 trillion last year, and is growing, and will continue to grow. And Chinese investments, Chinese-built infrastructure will be all over Southeast Asia. And that is to our good. But the more our account with China grows, the greater the concern that perhaps we may have become too dependent on China, and China will have too much influence over us. The instinct of Southeast Asian countries is to be neutral, to be friendly to China, to have China as a good friend, but not to have China as the only friend. So naturally, the stronger our relationship with China, the more we want to be friendly to Japan, to Korea, to America, to India, to Europe, and to others. This instinct to be friendly to everybody, to be neutral, to do harm to nobody, is very deep in Southeast Asia. And it's what will preserve a long-term beneficial relationship between China and Southeast Asia. Economically, we are very complementary. China is mostly land. China is dry, can be very cold, aging. Southeast Asia is a lot of water. It's warm. It's young. And we're all more or less in the same time zone. Because of this, there's so many things we can do together to trade, to interact, to benefit each other. President Xi has told ASEAN leaders that China has a market for 3 billion durians a year. Well, this is good business for Southeast Asian countries. And as Chinese people grow older, they want warmer climate. They'll go to Sichuan, Panna, they'll go to Hainan. But there's nothing to compare with the warm climate of the islands of Southeast Asia, the beautiful beaches, the delicious food. So we will see more and more Chinese come to Southeast Asia. And we'll see more and more Southeast Asians in China to learn, to trade, to invest, to become friends. It's a good future. US-China relations affect this future. Many companies, to avoid being the line of fire, they invest in Southeast Asia, including Chinese companies. That is good for us. But if relations become too tense, that's not good for us. You know, I told my Filipino friends, it is not good for China or Philippines to prolong this conflict. When President Duterte moved very close to China, I told my Chinese friends that this is not sustainable, because the Filipinos are naturally pro-American, ordinary Filipinos. Even though in the business community, many of them want good relations with China. Today's policy of being anti-China in the Philippines is also not sustainable. So I believe China-Philippine relations will be normalized. You'll go up and down, but you'll not get too bad, and it can't get too good. The challenge for us is how to develop a positive agenda for the South China Sea. You know, the South China Sea should be like the Mediterranean Sea, a sea which brings the countries together, as it has going back over 2,000 years. We talk about Jiaguwen in Zhang dynasty. Where did the turtle shells come from? Where did bird's nest come from? Sea cucumber, shark's fin, mainly from Southeast Asia. So there's a long history of contact, and the South China Sea connected us. Therefore, we must work doubly hard to conclude the code of conduct so that we can do things together while being sensitive to each other's concerns. Develop a positive agenda for the South China Sea. This is the only major issue which can spoil what will otherwise be a splendid future for ASEAN-China relations. Thank you.
Based on your observations and understanding, what other economic and trade areas do you think China and ASEAN can explore in the future?
Every time I come back to China, I see the society has changed. Shanghai has become much more middle class, very stylish. I noticed so many coffee shops everywhere. This is
Amazing.
astonishing. When I first came to China with my father, to Shantou, in 1983, we couldn't find anyone selling coffee in the whole of Shantou. And today, around every corner, there's a coffee shop. So we have to keep updating ourselves. And Southeast Asia is also changing. Even if you go to Vientiane or Phnom Penh or Surabaya, many changes. So the more we are in contact with one another, we will see opportunities. We can do this together. We can help you. You can help us. And in this way, we secure our common future. We should have a sense of direction, but don't be wedded to a fixed plan that it must be in this area and not in the other area, because the market is always full of surprises.
Speaking of the political and economic relationship between China and ASEAN, I must first commend our former Foreign Minister, Yeo. I read his memoirs, and there's a particularly brilliant section. In 2000, China proactively proposed establishing a free trade area with ASEAN countries. At that time, ASEAN was relatively pro-American, and China's sudden proposal of a free trade area, especially given how large an economy China was, even larger now, though not as large back then, came as a shock to them, making them quite concerned. Minister Yao suggested to the Chinese side, and his suggestion was adopted, to implement something called an early harvest program. This involved identifying products on which both sides could agree to quickly lower tariffs, particularly those where China could proactively make concessions and reduce tariffs. This allowed many member states, especially the smaller ones, to see the immense benefits of cooperating with China. Premier Zhu Rongji said it was an excellent idea and immediately adopted it. Minister Yao also recounted a detail in his memoirs. About 2 years later, when we officially signed the agreement, the free trade area's trade volume was $40 billion. Now, it's $1 trillion. What an increase! ASEAN is now China's largest trading partner. Later, Premier Zhu Rongji said something to this effect. We are signing this agreement today. If, 10 years from now, you feel you've been disadvantaged, and the balance is more favorable to China and unfavorable to ASEAN, we can renegotiate. We can revise it. That attitude reminds me of what President Xi often says now. A major country should act like a major country. Then, thinking about Trump, trying to impose over 40% tariffs on such small countries as Cambodia and Myanmar, Even if you imposed 100% tariffs, how much would such high tariffs truly help your economy? From a Chinese perspective, it's hard to imagine they could do something like that.
How did we quickly move past that period of confusion and swiftly transition into a broader state of cooperation?
We have to be realistic that relations will be good, sometimes not so good. There'll be crisis.
Ups and downs.
Ups and downs. So mentally, we must be prepared for that. And when there are problems, we should sit down and discuss how they should be resolved. Then we can have a new unity based on changed circumstances and achieve further progress. So the leadership on both sides is very important. Professor Zhang said about what Premier Zhu Rongji said in Phnom Penh was very important. It showed China's big-heartedness. And I remember at that time, I was trade minister, and I told my officials, I said, you will never hear this from the US or from Europe. A deal is a deal, and they hold you to it. The reason is because for China, a long-term stable relationship with Southeast Asia is very important to China. Historically, Southeast Asia has never threatened China. The danger to China came from the north, from the west, from the sea, never from Southeast Asia. And for as long as Southeast Asia stays friendly to China and benefits China by trade and other interactions, it is good for China and very good for us. Premier Zhu Rongji understood this, and he added in the second point. He said, China did not seek for itself an exclusive position in Southeast Asia. In other words, we want to be friendly to Southeast Asia, and we want Southeast Asia to be friendly to us. But we don't have to be exclusive. That was what Premier Zhu said. And that's very important, because by saying that, he understood our instinct and our feelings in Southeast Asia, that we want diversification. And because of that, it's a very stable, a very beautiful relationship.
What experiences does ASEAN have in managing its relationships with both China and the United States that could be shared with other regions?
I think ASEAN's approach is excellent. It consistently upholds its independence and neutrality. The EU, on the other hand, often struggles with this, frequently losing its independence and neutrality, which leads to US interference and deep involvement in the Russia-Ukraine conflict, much to its detriment. Fortunately, in this region, the major country is China, and China respects ASEAN's independence and neutrality.
We don't try to be a mediator between the US and China. That is beyond us. It's too dangerous. But we don't get involved in the quarrel. If we are affected, like on tariffs, we state our position. But if it's a problem between US and China, the instinct in Southeast Asia is don't get involved. It's too dangerous. And there's no benefit in getting involved. But we will always have the attitude, not of a troublemaker, but of a peacemaker. We want US and China to have good relations.
Given that Mr. Yeo has a long career in diplomacy and trade, his understanding of ASEAN is remarkably profound. I personally gained a lot of insight from listening to his speeches. Call this ASEAN wisdom, or perhaps Asian wisdom. Across the entire region, Southeast Asia and China both attach great importance to saving face for each other. He mentioned that ASEAN has many distinct characteristics, one of which is its rare use of voting. Instead, everyone strives for consensus through consultation. If a consensus can't be reached, they simply reconvene for further discussions, and paradoxically, this approach leads to faster progress.
All the time. You know, in ASEAN, we have maybe close to 1,000 meetings every year. We never vote. Because if we have a disagreement, we will say, well, let's study further. Maybe we form an eminent persons group or a special task force to make recommendations. And then we meet again. And then we try to compromise. If it's very important to you, okay, we respect it. We won't push too hard. If it's very important to me, if you can help me, please help me. So that's the attitude that we take. And the reason why we take this attitude is because within our own countries, we are very diverse. You take Singapore, we are 3/4 Chinese, but we're also Muslim. We have Indians, we have people from all over Southeast Asia and the world living side by side in Singapore. So we've got to give each other space and respect one another. There is no region more diverse in the world than ASEAN. In terms of political system, in terms of ethnicity, in terms of languages, religion, culture, food habits. So we have to accept each other for what he is. You cannot say, I will be your friend if you become like me. Then we have no friend. Even between husband and wife, that cannot be the basis of love, that you be like me or I be like you. We have to accept each other for what it is. This is Asian wisdom. We are ancient peoples. We can't change one another, but we've got to live with one another. And therefore, there has to be a truly liberal attitude towards human diversity. Not the liberalism of today, which is all political correctness, but a respect for identity, for differences. Then we can be good friends.
This truly represents genuine respect for differences.
If the TV cameras are not there, people will find a way to compromise. But if the TV cameras are there, then people are doing things for the TV cameras, not for one another. Then conflicts are accentuated. I think if the leaders have goodwill, we will find a way to manage these problems. We can't solve them completely. And we should think of positive things. Don't always see it as a zero-sum game, that if I win, you must lose. If you win, I must lose. Then we'll keep fighting each other. Think of a win-win solution so that both sides will benefit. It requires a certain compromise, but most importantly, you need trust. And today, between the Philippines and China, the trust has been damaged. But it is not completely gone. There's still cooperation, there's still trade. And there's still people on both sides who like each other, who love each other. So we should work on the positive. And if we keep working on the positive, in the end, the problems will become smaller. I've often said that the countries of Southeast Asia are united not out of love, but out of fear. Then we will go back to the 60s and 70s when Southeast Asia was divided by the Cold War. That if we are divided, external interference will be intense. But if we are united and we are neutral and non-threatening, then it's okay. Then everybody will be happy for Southeast Asia to be what it is. So we have succeeded in Southeast Asia to persuade all the major powers, China, Japan, America, India, that they are better off with a united ASEAN than a divided ASEAN. So we are united out of fear. But because we have so many meetings and we see each other so often, and we remember each other's birthdays, and we know each other's wives and children, we are getting closer and closer together. So I told my children just the other day, I said, as I grow older, I feel more and more a citizen of ASEAN. That when I go to Indonesia or Laos or Thailand, I feel this is my region. I belong here. And I believe this feeling is growing.
This provides a very concrete feeling. As Mr. Yo described it, people will truly feel part of ASEAN. This is a crucial aspect of identity formation and arguably the greatest change and shaping influence ASEAN has had on individuals over the years.
I'll give you an example. There was a terrible earthquake in Myanmar recently, great tragedy. And ASEAN countries are all helping the various disaster areas. And we are bringing in international organizations like the UN. Recently, the chairman of ASEAN, Prime Minister Anwar, the leader of Myanmar, Min Aung Hlaing, all to talk about humanitarian assistance. My recommendation is, when ASEAN talks to you, sends you assistance, please fly the ASEAN flag. In other words, you are part of the ASEAN family. If you are part of the ASEAN family, you are part of the ASEAN family of Myanmar. Therefore, please also fly the Myanmar flag. You can have your quarrels with Naypyidaw. You can have your disagreements. But know that you're in ASEAN and know that you're from the same country. And this alone will create a better disposition towards negotiation. But if you refuse to fly the ASEAN flag, that means that you do not want to be part of the ASEAN family. Then why should we engage you? So these little things we can do without forcing on the people of Myanmar a political solution for which there is no easy answer in the near future.
He brought up an example that really resonated with me. We've been discussing whether ASEAN can maintain its unity, and my feeling is this. ASEAN is generally united, but it also has many internal differences of opinion. However, there's basically a mainstream and a few tributaries, which is very clear to us. For instance, the ASEAN mainstream doesn't approve the Philippines' actions on some islands and reefs. They might not object publicly, but if you talk to them privately, they feel that what the Philippines is doing isn't quite appropriate.
The Mekong River flows from China, Myanmar, Thailand, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam. What is done upstream affects what happens downstream. Now, recently, because the Indians were very angry with Pakistan, so they said they will cut off the water to Pakistan. I was very troubled by this, because if we start thinking this way, imagine if China, when it's angry with Cambodia, cut off the water of the Mekong. This is very dangerous and disastrous. So when we share a common river, it's important to cooperate. So China has to cooperate with all the countries downstream so that everybody is blessed by the same river. And the river unites us rather than divides us. So these are little things, well, not that little, but important things which we should never lose sight of, even when we are angry with one another. Markets are flexible. Governments can institute one policy or another. Markets will adjust. For example, when the Americans embargoed Russian gas, the gas still went to Europe because China has long-term contracts with Russia. And China has short-term gas positions in the Middle East. So it took the long-term gas from China and it sold in the Middle East. And that gas went to Europe. Markets have a way to find an alternative route. So if the Americans say nothing from China, then it goes to Vietnam or Cambodia or Indonesia or Malaysia. And if the Americans say, no Chinese content, it's okay. Then they'll make it. They say, no Chinese owners. Then these owners become Thai or Malaysian or Singaporean. It's like Italian products. Many products come from Italy. But many of these products are in fact made by Wenzhou people living in Italy. And they are Italian citizens, and some of them are Catholics. But they're still Wenzhou people. They still have the mentality, the drive of Wenzhou people. So markets are always able to adjust. And Trump can put all these tariffs, but the water will find its way.
In theory, the market economy always finds a way, using various methods to enter the U.S. market. But more importantly, more and more entrepreneurs are discovering that ASEAN itself is a huge market. The ASEAN market has 700 million people, with an average age of 30, making it very young and highly receptive to internet and digital products. So, we are still discussing an upgrade of the free trade area, clearly targeting the digital economy, green economy, and intelligent economy. These are all developing towards high-tech directions and primarily aimed at the local market.
China's best response is to do the opposite of the US. So the US puts tariff barriers. China should reduce tariff barriers. The US said, I won't give you my market. China should open its market to the world. So this will put a discipline on what America can do, but it also helps everybody. During this period, when Trump has mounted the trade war, we should deepen, broaden the RCEP.
China can be so open not only because we already have such excellent and deep economic and trade cooperation with ASEAN, but also because of the cultural and political mutual trust that allows both sides to cooperate more deeply, becoming a unified large market and a shared community with a shared future. Today, I want to extend a big thank you to former Foreign Minister Yeo for joining us. You come from an ASEAN country, and we are from China. China and ASEAN together in today's dialogue make for an excellent pairing. We will jointly write a new chapter of history. Thank you.
这就是中国，听张伟伟说。